Yeah, I mean, little bro stay doing little bro things, you know. So MSU to little bro, they can do whatever they want. We knew it was gonna get chippy, but you know everything within the confines of the game we do right. And then after they want to get busy, we'll get busy.
You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Happy Monday. Hell yeah, Matt Kirby, state champions. Feels good. We haven't.
Hey, Chris, I have one question.
Oh, here it comes.
Who predicted a Michigan win? Like who thought that Michigan was going to win? Who did not? Who did not think that Michigan could win this game?
See what I got to deal with here right out of the gate. Trent just, pumping it up, patting himself on the back. Yeah, I mean, Trent, look, you're right. I was just going to say, we haven't had the opportunity to do this in a while. I feel like it's been about a month since we've come on here and done a live show and talked about a Michigan victory. Yes, Trent, you were the only one of the three of us who picked them to win, obviously because you're the ultimate fanboy. You saw that coming. But for the rest of us realists, there were some real concerns heading into this game. But I mean, you said you were pretty clear on how you felt about this game, that if it had been played on the road in East Lansing or even on a neutral site, yep, you might have leaned Michigan, but you thought because it was in the big house, the environment, the energy, two teams that have their own struggles in their own right, that it was going to go Michigan's way. It did seem like how that played out. Trent, I mean, do you think that was the deciding factor here, is that, it just really came down to Michigan? They had that game in their own building.
Yeah, and I still stand by what I said. If this was in East Lansing or it was a neutral field, I probably would have predicted Michigan State. But like I said on Friday, the way I always look at it, it doesn't matter if it's a top 5 matchup, top 10, if both teams aren't very good. You're talking about a primetime game. The crowd was into it. And also, you have two offenses that, while Michigan State has shown the capability of putting up yards, they're not that great either. Like Aiden Childs has been a turnover machine all season long. He did it again on Saturday. And I also said if Michigan could stay turnover free, like that would be humongous in this game. And then in fact they did, shockingly, and they also didn't commit a penalty all game either. So you're talking about a flawless effort, no turnovers, no penalties. Like it just led to good things for Michigan.
It did. And you know what else it led to? Just one of the most incredible sound bites in the history of this rival. Let's just play it back. Let's play it back.
Yeah, I mean, little bro stay doing little bro things, you know. So MSU to little bro, they can do whatever they want. We knew it was going to get chippy, but, everything within the confines of the game we do right. And then after they want to get busy, we'll get busy.
Oh, my God. Just what an epic quote there from Colston Loveland at the end of the game. Obviously.
Is that better than Mike Hart's?
It's damn near. Well, the thing about Mike Hart's comment is it sort of started off the whole little brother thing. That's the OG comment. And so I don't think anything can really top it, because everything that has happened since has really come from that. But I would say this, I put it up there with Devin Bush taking a cleat to the midfield logo. I mean, it was that type of just memorable thing. And, obviously Colston Loveland's a guy, there's no question he's played his last game in that rivalry. He's 3-0. He has owned the Spartans. And so, yeah, I mean, he can step up to the mic and pretty much say whatever he wants. And obviously that was a product of the post-game dust-up. Trent, I mean, what were your thoughts on that overall? Because it seemed like the game was mostly a clean game. But when you went to social media afterwards, of course, fans from Michigan State were crying foul. They were playing the victim card. It was, the big bad bully Wolverines. They just can't win with grace. I saw it a little bit differently, but again, we have some bias in us. We're Michigan football fans. What do you think led to that? Why exactly did that occur at the end of the game?
Well, to be completely honest with you, I was up in the press box when it ended. I was finishing up my takeaways, and I look up and I see the teams out there, and they're in a scuffle, and the refs, coaches are trying to break it up. So I didn't even see what started it, but then obviously it's all over social media, and you look, and to me, it appeared that a Michigan State player got into Colson Loveland's face and with his hands, and that's, to me, that's what looked like it started it. So, I mean, if you want to go there, it looks like Michigan State did start it ultimately, and then it just escalated from there.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Jones, defensive lineman for Michigan State. Michigan was in victory formation. They were getting ready to take a knee. No need to make contact there if you're a defensive lineman. Even if you do, you know how that typically goes. Like, you make light contact or whatever, everybody knows the game is over. But Anthony Jones had other ideas, and he decided to come at Colston Loveland with some aggression, and there was even a bit of a slap across the face mask. And I think Colston Loveland was at a point in his career where he just wasn't going to deal with it. He wasn't going to let it slide, and he came back with a, people want to call it a headbutt. I think it was more of just a, hey, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere sort of thing. And then, again, Anthony Jones he couldn't handle the retaliation, and that's what really sparked it off. And so I think, look, anybody that saw that, that post-game altercation and wanted to put it on Colston Loveland, I think that, you're probably just a little sore. You're probably just a little hurt. You're probably just tired of losing to the Michigan Wolverines. And to be quite honest, like, this is a down year for Michigan. This was a year where I'm sure a lot of people in East Lansing thought they were going to be able to come into the big house and get it done and, celebrate another victory over a first-year Michigan head football coach, and it didn't go that way. And so I'm not going to read any more into that, that event after the game. I don't think it's as big of a deal as a lot of people seem to think. But MSU,
just because it's Michigan State and Michigan, that's the only reason it's a deal.
Correct.
A big deal.
And there's history there. Obviously, the tunnel incident. There have been some things between these two programs that have led to things like this. And the last I saw, Michigan State athletic director did, I guess, announce that he had contacted the Big Ten, had some things to say, and I don't know if there's going to be anything that comes from it. I can't imagine there's going to be anything that comes from it.
Today, Sharon Moore said they have not heard from the Big Ten on anything.
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to hear from? What are you going to hear from?
Right.
Like a Michigan State player lost is cool. A Michigan State player was the one who initiated it. And you can feel however you want about, Colston Loveland, his reaction to it. But I don't know, man. Somebody shoves you and slaps you across the face. You're probably anybody who's in the same position is probably going to respond the same way, especially when you're a competitor and it's a rivalry game like that. So again, I'm not going to read too much into it, man. I just think that overall, like, the game itself, I was surprised. It was a clean game, a hard fought game. Obviously, both teams came to compete. Michigan comes out on top, but dude, like, we'll get into this. There's some good from Saturday. There's some not so good from Saturday, but overall, I mean, you're gonna take a win, especially in the rivalry win, is any way that you can get it. And this did feel like a must-win game for Sharon Moore, right? And had to go. We knew what the history was, not since like the late 40s, had a first-year Michigan coach defeated the Michigan State Spartans in the first try. That includes guys like Bo Schembechler and Jim Harbaugh. And Sharon Moore was able to get it done. And so maybe let's just start there with the good. And specifically with Sharon Moore. Going into this game, it was about as hot as it could possibly get for Sharon as a year one guy, with a good chunk of this fan base already decided that, hey, man, he's not the guy for the future. It's time to move on. If you're Ward Manuel, you got to start looking elsewhere. Trent, with what you saw on Saturday, do you think that maybe that changes the tone? Maybe that tones it down a little bit in terms of how fans in general view Sharon Moore and his future at the University of Michigan?
Well, I still feel pretty strongly about, I don't think the win changed the overall fans' view of Sharon Moore. But he had to have won this game, because if not, that heat that's already on him from the fan base was just going to keep on pouring down. It was just going to get hotter and hotter if he would have lost this game against Michigan State. So while I don't think it's going to change the overall narrative around Sharon, I think it should. I mean, the trend is the trend. Michigan head coaches, for whatever reason, cannot beat Michigan State in year one. And that's been a thing for a long time now. And we're talking about a Michigan team that was just kept trending downward. Their trajectory, I can't talk. Trajectory was not high.
Where's it? Hold on a second here. There we go. Had to get that in.
And Michigan State, I mean, they were playing good football going into this game. They just got done crushing Iowa, and which made a lot of people pick against Michigan because of that. But Michigan, while the first quarter was terrible, they had 15 yards of total offense. The defense didn't look very good in the first quarter. We finally saw a change in them, though. They played 4 quarters of football for the most part. They came out of the tunnel the second half. They played really well. We saw Kurt Campbell open things up a little bit, and the play calling. Heck, I think 5 straight plays Davis Warren threw for like 7, 10, 15, 9, and like 23 back to back to back to back. And we saw things open up there. Donovan Edwards had another passing touchdown. So I think there's reason there's definitely hope and reasons for optimism about this team going forward. Obviously, though, it's still a daunting schedule, right? You got Oregon, you got Indiana, you got Ohio State. So if you can find a way to go 2-2 in that stretch, I think you should be happy.
Yeah, and you can see it in the comment section. A lot of people pointing out Chris Hamill from the Facebook page. He says the trick plays were a nice touch. Keep that up. Matt Kirby from the Facebook page. Good to see you. He says play calling was a little more dynamic. Chad Zolman from the Facebook page says better play calling with some wrinkles and tricks. Can we keep that style up and be more creative going forward? Trent, you talk about some of the heat that maybe Sharon Moore had been facing through the first 7 weeks of the season. I would venture to say Kurt Campbell and Wink Martindale are 1A and 1B as far as guys that, are on the chopping block, at least as far as the fan base is concerned. And while I still think there are concerns on both sides of the ball, to what we're seeing here in the comments section, thoughts on Kurt Campbell and what you saw from the play calling on Saturday night?
I'm still very confused with what Kurt Campbell does on the play calling. But, overall, I think you got to be happier with it. I think, there were still times where run up the middle, then you're talking 3rd and long, and it just wasn't going good. They 3 and out. So, you still have those type of things going on in there. And I realize that probably most teams do that, but then you saw the second half, he opens it up and they do their flea flicker. It works. Davis Warren probably throws the best football of any Michigan quarterback all season long to Tyler Morris. He calls a running back pass with Donovan Edwards. Once again, he throws a touchdown pass. Like you saw different things on Saturday that we really haven't seen all season. But not only with the play calling, I feel like the Michigan players executed it much better than they have all season long. And it starts there too, right? Yeah. I feel like the offensive line played better. And, talking about Michigan's run game, if I would have told you that Khalil Mullings and Donovan Edwards combined for like 60 yards, like there's no way Michigan wins this game, right? No way.
Said it on Friday. I flat out said if Khalil Mullings doesn't rush for 100 yards or more, I don't think Michigan wins this game. And there was a point there in the first half. I think there was 8 minutes left in the second quarter. And I look up at the big Jumbotron and I see Michigan with 0 rushing yards. 0 rushing yards with 8 minutes left in the second quarter. Khalil Mullings not doing anything. Donovan Edwards not doing anything. To me, that told me, holy shit, Davis Warren is going to have to go out and win this game with his arm. And I was very, very concerned. And I would say midway through the second quarter, if you were looking at the way this game was playing out, me along with every single other person in this Michigan fan base just did not see a path to victory with the way that the numbers were trending.
And then you bring in Alex Orji. We haven't talked about him yet, but you bring him in for, I think he had 10 snaps and he ran it, I believe
6 times.
6 times for 64 yards. Like he was good. Like it just everything worked in Michigan's favor offensively. And the crazy part is they were outgained 352 to 265, but they made enough plays offensively that gets you by in that aspect. And then, I know we'll talk about the defense here in a second, but the defense, while they got gashed, especially in the run game, they still made enough plays. You're talking about the strip sack by Josiah Stewart in the first half to allow Davis Warren to get the team down the field for that last second field goal to take the lead. Like there was enough plays made on both sides of the ball to get this victory.
Yeah, no question about it. Matt Kirby points out that they outscored Michigan State in the second half. That is the first time in 6 games that the Michigan Wolverines have outscored an opponent in the second half. And they needed it, to be quite honest, because Michigan State did have an opportunity to get back in this thing after taking an early lead. But yeah, man, as I was sitting back and sort of reflecting on the offense and just some of the good things that I saw, it starts with 0 penalties. They didn't give up any sacks, and they didn't have any turnovers. Trent, that was the first time all season long that Michigan didn't have a penalty in a game and didn't have a turnover in the game. And I think that if they are turning the ball over in a game like this, you might see a different result, but they didn't. If you are committing penalties, you might see a different result, but they didn't. So as much as we want to get on the coaching staff about how this team's undisciplined and they play, inconsistent, the fact that they came out, that's 4 quarters of football, 0 penalties, 0 sacks, 0 turnovers. So I thought that was a really good aspect of what we saw on Saturday night. And then the balance offensively, I really like that. And you would hit on it a little bit, the use of Alex Orji. I felt like this is what we saw from this offense on Saturday night is probably the best version of this offense you're going to get, where there is balance with a guy like Davis Warren in the running game, but then you bring in Alex Orji to be that dynamic guy with his legs. And you're right, 64 yards and a touchdown on 6 attempts. Alex Orji was dynamic. Michigan had 20 pass attempts to 31 rushing attempts. I do think that's a good balance. That's a good split between this passing attack and this rushing attack. If you can do 20 passing attempts compared to 31 rushing attempts, I think you're in a pretty good spot. And then, their creativity with Donovan Edwards, allowing him to throw the touchdown pass, who, by the way, Donovan Edwards now in his career, he's 4 for 4, I believe, with a couple of touchdowns under his belt. So Donovan Edwards may with 3 touchdowns under his belt, he may be the best quarterback on Michigan's roster. But that might be worth something exploring in the future. And then Colston Loveland, again, like you talk about Mr. Automatic, Mr. Where he needs to be, Mr. Make a play when Michigan needs it most. Colston Loveland was big time, 6 receptions for 67 yards, 2 touchdowns. Once again, he led all receivers, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then when it comes to Kirk Campbell specifically, I agree, Trent. There are still issues that I see with how the offense is called. And some of that may be the result of, and we hear it all the time, if a play works, nobody's going to question it. It's only when it's not working that people question it. And there's a lot of times where things don't work and Michigan goes 3 and out and you're like, well, why would they do that? Why wouldn't they try something else? But coming out of the half has been a big issue for the Michigan Wolverines. When they come out of the tunnel, they typically look flat offensively. Trent, that first drive in the third quarter when Michigan came out of the tunnel, they went 11 plays for 75 yards and scored a touchdown, took over 5 minutes off the clock. And I think that was Michigan's best offensive drive of the season. And so when I sit back and I look at all of that, I think that's how the Michigan offense is supposed to look. With this specific team, this is as good as they're going to look. And I think it's encouraging to see that they can go out and do it. They've got the guys to execute. They've got a guy like Alex Orji who can hurt a defense with his legs. Davis Warren can be solid through the air. The Michigan offensive line can prevent the defense from getting sacks. Now, granted, Michigan State isn't necessarily elite at getting sacks, but the offensive line did what they needed to do. And then you got a little bit of everything out of the rushing game. And then, with a guy like Colston Loveland helping the receiving numbers, that's great. But again, we'll talk about the wide receivers a little bit later. Overall, man, I just felt reasonably encouraged by what I saw from the Michigan offense, looking at the remainder of the schedule, that, hey, this team can do some good things. And is it going to be good enough to win on every Saturday? I'm not sure, but it was good enough to win this Saturday.
Yeah, speaking about Kirk Campbell, so I one drive in particular that stood out to me, which was raised my eyebrows. So following Michigan State's touchdown to make it a 7-point game, Michigan, of course, got the ball back, and they went run up the middle, no gain, run up the middle, 1 yard, tough throw, incomplete, 3 and out, punt the ball. And that's when Michigan State went down the field and ultimately got stopped on 4th down. But just like that, you have a drive that you could try to get a little creative, sustain the drive, hopefully go down and get points, or just run the clock out, and you go up the middle, and then tough throw. It's like everything got tight for whatever reason instead of doing what worked the whole game, because Michigan really didn't get tight play calling wise until that final drive that they had, which I didn't fully understand.
Yeah. You know what else I don't fully understand? Yeah. We brought it back. For those who don't know what that is, consider yourself lucky. Trent had to listen to it over the weekend. I sent him the link. Spartan Dog, again, this is a guy that cannot be having a good set of days here. Not easy to be a Spartan Dog these days. So Trent, yeah, I mean, there are some good things that we talked about here, and I think some things to feel encouraged about. By no means do I think it's like, playoffs, although if I'm being completely honest, I knew I was going to do this. You call me cool.
If they can beat Oregon.
We'll get into that later in the show, but I will say, the deadness in my eyes, just the lack of soul and happiness behind them. Trent, when they got this win, there was just like a glimmer that appeared back. I'm starting to feel it. I'm not quite there yet, but yeah, I mean,
What happens if we went out, huh?
we'll talk about it.
They
But
went out, they're in. Like, there's no question about it.
with number 1 Oregon coming to town this weekend, this is a massive opportunity for this Michigan football program and this coaching staff to really flip the narrative on what's going on in Ann Arbor. We will get to that toward the end of the show. But let's talk about, some of the not so good things that we saw on Saturday, because if we're being perfectly honest, Trent, going into the half, granted, Michigan made some things happen to close out the first half that really, swung the score in their favor, but it did not look good for 90% of the first half of that football game. So you talked about the things you liked about what you saw, Trent. What were some of the things that I guess you were still a little bit concerned about?
I don't have too much of a concern with this game from the offense, other than, once again, I feel like overall the receiver,
either side of the ball, offense, defensively, whichever.
Offensively, though, I feel like it's still a concern how receivers, they struggle to create separation. I mean, there are a lot of times where it's man coverage and Samaj Morgan, Tyler, whoever's on the field, they struggle to create separation, which again is why Colston Loveland gets so many targets. Not only because he's really good, because he is, but he's about the only guy out there that you can count on to create that separation that you need, where Davis Warren or whoever is on the field can get the ball to him. So offensively, I felt pretty good other than that aspect. And that's probably nitpicking, because honestly, I thought they played better than they have all season long. On defense, I thought the defense was okay, but how many third and longs did they give up? I joked up in the box, like, I think coaches smile when they get to 3rd and 8 or longer against this Michigan team, because it feels like there's a good chance that they're going to convert on 3rd and long against Michigan. And I don't understand why. There were, I think, 3 plays where it was 3rd and 8 or longer, and they have Mason Graham lined up on the edge. Michigan State runs it up the middle, and you have Kenneth Grant and whoever else was in at that point in time, and it's a first down. And I don't understand what Wink is doing there. Why would you not have your best 4 players there? You could have Josiah Stewart, Derek Moore, Mason Graham, and Kenneth Grant. Your front 4 is great. Then hope that your secondary can hold up. But instead, they changed things up, which, I'm not a coach, but I don't understand what they're doing there. And then missed tackles, man. It's an issue every single game. Zeke Berry missed a couple tackles. Makari Page, man, he's a veteran. He's a captain of this team. He missed 6 tackles. He had 6 missed tackles on Saturday against Michigan State. And it's a theme that we just keep seeing on and on and on. And we're now 8 games in. How do you correct that at this stage?
Yeah, the thing with Makari, man, like, he comes back, team captain, a guy that you think, and especially with a guy like Rod Moore going down, like, you would just expect a guy like Makari Page to really be playing his best football at this point. And I don't know what it is. Like you said, we're not coaches. You know what I mean? All we do is we sit back and watch it, and we look at the stat sheet afterwards, and it's like, how many missed tackles are we going to have? I mean, these are fundamental type things that you just can't have these types of issues at this level of football. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that that's a valid concern. And, when I look at some of the concerns, Trent, the slow start offensively, I think was a big concern for me. You're looking up, like I said, you're looking up at the scoreboard. Michigan has 0 rushing yards halfway through the second quarter. And you're thinking, how can this be possible when Michigan's bread and butter is to run the football game? And I think, against a team like Michigan State, you might be able to get away with it, but you're not going to be able to get away with a slow start like that against an Oregon, against an Ohio State, hell, against an Indiana. The game's going to be over by halftime if you start that slowly. And so Kirk Campbell has got to find a way to recreate that magic that we saw to start off the third quarter on that first drive. You got to get that right out of the gate from these guys. And it was encouraging to see that they are willing to take risks, that they are willing to push the ball down the field. They are willing to make shit happen. And to be honest, in the second half, I sort of just got that vibe from this team that they were at a point where it was like, look, we're going to lose if we just don't start trying. We're just going to try. And it was electric. And it was like, oh, they can do this. Oh, they can do that. And it looked like an offense that knew what it was doing. Kirk Campbell's got to find a way to get that out of these guys right out of the beginning. So slow start, an issue. And then Trent, you talked about it. third down on defense. Third down defense continues to be an issue for this team. Michigan gave up 8 of 15. So once again, over 50% for Michigan State on third down. I just, that has been a theme now. We're through 8 games in the season. I don't think it's a correctable issue for this team. And I think that that's something that you've got to look at Wink Martindale. And you're right, on a third down and distance, why the hell is Mason Graham off at the edge? Like, I agree and will embrace creativity and play calling and scheme. But sometimes it's almost like you're trying to be the smartest guy in the room. Like, Mason Graham needs to be in the interior of the defense. That's where he needs to be. So to take him out of that spot, put him on the edge on a critical third down, I just don't understand those things. And I'm sure there'll be questions about that with Sharon Moore today. And hopefully we'll get some answers to those things. But ultimately, I just think there are some things defensively that Wink Martindale does that I just don't understand. But again, it's not all on Wink Martindale. If you can't make tackles, that's on personnel, that's on players. So it's sort of a mixed bag there. And then the last part, and Trent, you touched on this a little bit earlier. Still very, very little impact from the wide receivers. And I'm not saying they're not making an impact by being blockers and helping the offense in other ways other than making receptions. But taking Colston Loveland out of the mix because he's your tight end, taking Loveland out of the mix, Michigan's leading receiver in terms of receptions on Saturday was Samaj Morgan with 3 receptions. He had 12 yards on 3 receptions. Every other wide receiver here listed, which was Peyton O'Leary, Tyler Morris, Kendrick Bell, had 1 reception. So Samaj
for double-digit yardage.
For double-digit yardage. So what, is it an issue? I still believe that's an issue. I get it. When you have a guy like Colston Loveland out there, sure, you want to get the ball to him as much as you possibly can, and 9 times out of 10, he's going to deliver for you. But the lack of effectiveness of these wide receivers through 8 weeks, to me, is just, it remains the most puzzling aspect of this Michigan offense by far. Why can't a Michigan wide receiver find a way to have a good day? Is that on Kurt Campbell? Is that on personnel? Is that on quarterback? Because Colston Loveland seems to find a way. Why can't any of these other guys find a way? Michigan's 5-3. They got the win on Saturday. So how much are you really going to harp on it? Not too much. I think like a lot of the defensive issues, some of it just, it is what it is at this point. But Trent, is it not puzzling to you that we're now heading into week 9 and we have not seen a Michigan wide receiver have one good game?
Yeah, because I think you and I were both on the same page entering the season that Samaj Morgan and Tyler Morris, like they're going to be your number 1 and number 2 guys.
Ronnie Bell-ish.
We both thought that they could do something.
Yeah.
And it's been worse than bad, to be completely honest with you. And I still believe if you put Samaj Morgan at Oregon or Ohio State or somewhere, that he's probably pretty good. But for whatever reason, whether it is it's all on Kurt Campbell, Ron Bellamy, the receivers coach, or just a personnel issue, maybe they're not as good as what people thought going into the season. I think it's probably a combination of it all. And yeah, we're 8 games in, entering the 9th game, and at this point, man, it is what it is. Like, thankfully, Michigan has Colston Loveland, because if they didn't, this passing game would be worse than what it is.
Yeah, there's no question. And Scott, there's no doubt that this is playing a factor. The fact that Michigan has rotated through quarterbacks, and actually, I want to stay on this for just a little bit. Trent, how much do you think that the rotation at quarterback has played a sizable factor in the fact that a Michigan wide receiver just can't find a way to get involved?
Yeah, once again, I don't care what anybody says. There's definitely a chemistry connection with everybody, right? Like when you start Davis Warren to begin the season, I'm assuming he's getting probably all the ones in practice, and he's working with Tyler Morris and Samaj Morgan and whoever else. And then you switch it after 2.5 games. Then you bring in a guy that you don't even trust to throw the football. You bring in Alex Orji, a guy that you're going to run it time in and time out, just over and over, because you don't trust him to throw. Well, then your receivers, of course, they're not getting the ball. If you only throw the ball 15 times a game or less, then these guys aren't touching the football because you have Colston Loveland on your team. But then once again, you make a switch to a veteran guy, Jack Tuttle. And when he came in, he's only had 1 week of practice. So it's not like, you've had this guy over and over working with the ones and getting that connection and getting that chemistry with your receivers. And once again, you flip back to Davis Warren. And right now, after one game, you got to think that he's your best option after the game against Michigan State, because the Michigan offense actually moved the football.
Yeah. And so, it is a mixed bag for sure, but you can't take all of it off of the wide receivers. Like, some of it belongs on them. And Tyrone from the Facebook page, he says too small. I mean, look, might sound harsh, but I don't know. Colston Loveland, like I said, Michigan has gone through and has cycled through 4 quarterbacks. Ricky, I know that you're saying it's only 3 quarterbacks with Warren, Orji, and Tuttle, but I think when you go back to the guy you started with, that classifies as a 4th starting quarterback. So yeah, it has been 4 quarterback changes for the Michigan Wolverines, and I'm sure that makes things difficult. But again, Colston Loveland finds a way to be successful. He finds a way to make big time plays no matter who's tossing him the ball. And so, maybe it is a scheme issue with Kurt Campbell and just not putting the wide receivers in a position to be successful. Maybe size is a bit of an issue because, you look at Colston Loveland and Samaj Morgan standing next to each other, and it's almost like they play a different sport, but they are essentially playing the same position out there on the field. And one guy is finding a way to be successful and the other guy is not. And so, but I do want to talk about this, Michigan being on its 4th starting quarterback in a couple of ways. One, what it means from Sharon Moore, but 2, what it means for the quarterback position moving forward. So we talked about this going into the game, that whoever Michigan started at quarterback against Michigan State, that was going to need to be the guy moving forward. You cannot go ahead and make a 5th quarterback change heading into week 9. So based on what you saw from Davis Warren, which, let's be clear, he didn't turn the ball over. Completion percentage was fairly good. He was like 149 yards. It wasn't an elite performance through the air by any stretch. Solid enough, though, to keep the job for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I think so. I think that he might give you a little bit of hope, actually. I think so he got benched because he threw 6 interceptions in 2.5 games. Yeah, he only threw for 123 yards on Saturday night, but he was efficient. What did he complete? He completed 68% of his throws. He was efficient. Another issue with Davis Warren that hindered him early on, he only had 1 read. Like, he wouldn't go through his progressions. Well, we saw that on Saturday. Like, it actually looks like he took his practice that he's had all season long, because he said he never gave up. He was a team guy first, and he wanted to do whatever he could do to help this team win, even if he wasn't the starting quarterback. And it looks like that, like, he actually did that. He went through practice and he tried to get better. He tried to learn from his mistakes, and he put that all out there on Saturday night. Obviously, when you get benched, when you're the starting quarterback, like, it's got to sting a little bit. And then when you're given that opportunity once again, then there's going to be pressure on your shoulders. And outside of that first quarter, because the whole Michigan offense didn't look very good that first quarter, he played very well. And I still don't think he's your guy for 2025, but I think that he gives you a lot of hope to finish the season.
And I think that's fair, which I think leads into another valid question and something else we talked about heading into the Michigan State game. We are now in that window, Trent, where if you wanted to take any sort of promises off the table, any sort of rumor, speculation, whatever, if you're head coach Sharon Moore and you wanted to, you could play Jaden Davis, true freshman, the rest of the way, every single game, including if you make a bowl game, and you could maintain his red shirt. Trent, you've seen these guys now through 8 weeks. Davis Warren looked okay. He looked all right. Is it good enough to beat Oregon? I don't know. Is it good enough to beat Ohio State? I'm not sure. If you're Sharon Moore, do you seriously entertain the idea of getting your true freshman out there now? Whether it's in a starting role or not, do we need to see Jaden Davis begin to get reps for the rest of the season?
I entertain it. I don't do it right now. While I know that I think we all believe that Michigan's not going to beat Oregon this week, I think that...
Speak for yourself here, Trent.
Like, if you're Sharon Moore, you've got to be thinking that you have to go with your best option. You have to be thinking that, hey, if we can beat the number 1 ranked team in the nation, if we can beat a top 13 team in Indiana who's going to be undefeated more than likely, and then if you can somehow go to Columbus and beat a top 5 Ohio State, like, you're getting into the playoff. You're not going to win the Big Ten, but you are getting into the playoff at 9-3. So do you throw your true freshman in there, who's while we all want to see what this kid can do because he is the future of Michigan football, but say that he's not prepared, say he's not ready because ultimately that's what I believe, which is why he hasn't played. I'm not giving into those rumors that there was a promise to the family. I think it's because Jaden Davis wasn't ready. So do you throw him in there and essentially give up on the season, or do you play Davis Warren and Alex Orji and the rules that they had against Oregon because it worked? They won against Michigan State. So if you want to beat the number one team in the nation, I think you keep rolling with what you saw on Saturday night, which gives you a little bit of hope from this Michigan offense.
Yeah, I agree. I think I said this to you going into the game. I thought Davis Warren was going to turn the ball over again. Hell, I thought we might have 2 interceptions by halftime. And the fact that he played clean, the fact that he didn't try to, now listen, there were a couple balls that he threw right in the dirt, just not good balls. And maybe you expect that every now and then from even great quarterbacks. They're going to miss the mark. But by and large, Davis Warren played good, clean football. And the way that they utilized Alex Orji and how effective he was when he came in his 6 rushing attempts led the Wolverines in rushing. Was it 64 yards on the ground? Got a touchdown.
Yep.
That duo, that switch up, that change pitch, that I think can work against a team like Oregon if they continue to avoid turning the ball over. So you're right, Trent.
That's the key.
I feel like that is the key. And that's the reason why folks like you and I have been advocating for why not do it? Because prior to the Michigan State game, it felt like, I don't even think they're going to beat Michigan State. Like everything is off the table for this team now. Now you're preparing for next year. Primary reason why? You've got 15 turnovers in 7 weeks. 15 turnovers in 7 weeks. You don't have a quarterback that can take care of the ball outside of Alex Orji, but Alex Orji couldn't really make anything happen through the air. But I think what we saw on Saturday, that was what it was supposed to be to open the season. The biggest difference now is I think the offensive line is a little bit better. You saw Davis Warren didn't get sacked at all. And when he wasn't facing tremendous pressure, he wasn't making a ton of mistakes. And so, look, here's the other caveat, though. Oregon's defensive line, significantly better than Michigan State's defensive line. Davis Warren is going to face pressure against Oregon. It is going to be a whole different type of ball game on Saturday in the Big House. Was it 3:30 CBS? Going to be a different animal facing Oregon. That's the number one team in the country, and they're there for a reason. But I think you're right, Trent, that everything from here on out is if Davis Warren can take care of the ball, he doesn't got to be a superstar. How many times did we say it going into the season? If we can get somebody who's Cade McNamara-ish, Trent, that performance from Davis Warren felt very Cade McNamara 2021-ish. Like that's exactly what we hoped we would get at the beginning of the season, and that's what we seem to get on Saturday. And so I think if you can replicate that offensively, yeah, there's no need to go to the true freshman. It at least held it off to me for another week because now here we are once again, Trent, talking about, well, maybe the playoffs, maybe, right? If you do this and you do that and you do this, maybe, possibly, right? I don't know.
Now, I do want to say if Michigan loses to Oregon, obviously the playoff is 100% off the table. So I think that's when, especially if Davis doesn't play well, if he doesn't play well, he turns the ball over, and you do think about making another quarterback change, I think that's when you look at giving Jaden Davis a chance, because at that point in time, you're playing for a bowl game, but you're playing for one of the worst bowl games that you could possibly play for, going 6-6 or 7-5 at best. So that's when you look at giving Jaden Davis a chance, not against Oregon.
And that is the only change you can make at this point. I mean, unless there's an injury, if you're making a quarterback change, week 10, week 11, it's got to be to your true freshman. There is no sense in going back to a Jack Tuttle or going to an Alex Orji at that point when you've really got to let's just get something figured out for the future, because one of the questions that Ricky has here in the Facebook from the Facebook page is about the transfer portal and what Michigan needs to do. And I think that's largely dependent on what you think you have in Jaden Davis. And, no better way to find that out than to watch him perform on fall Saturdays. I mean, you can watch him in the spring game and in practices and against the Michigan defense. And you can hope that maybe, the Michigan defense is going to be elite, but sometimes those things are misleading and you don't get what you think you're going to get out of your quarterback just based on practice reps alone. So here's the last thing I want to say about Scott's point here about being in the fourth starting quarterback. And I think I talked about this earlier in the week, but what it means about Sharon Moore. And I understand Sherrone Moore has taken a lot of heat. I think some of it may be warranted, maybe to a certain extent. I think there's far more heat that's warranted for the coordinators, but Sherrone Moore put them in place. I understand. But the fact that Michigan is now on their fourth starting quarterback heading into week 9, I guess I take some encouragement in the fact that Sherrone Moore is a guy who's willing to try. He's a guy who's willing to make difficult decisions for the sake and the betterment of the football program. And I think that starting the year, it seemed like the combination of Davis Warren and Alex Orji would work well. And I think we got a window into that on Saturday night against Michigan State. I think that's probably what they thought it was going to look like week 1. But it didn't look like that week 1. Davis Warren was turning the ball over at an alarming rate, and Alex Orji wasn't that effective as a runner. And so after 3 weeks of that, Sherrone Moore said, we got to make a change. Let's go to Alex Orji, dynamic dual threat guy. Let's see what he can do. And Alex Orji had a couple of games, 2.5 games to be able to prove that he could be the guy. And when it became apparent that Michigan wasn't going to be effective enough through the air to get it done, Sherrone Moore once again made a quarterback change to his veteran Jack Tuttle, who had been injured all season long, and said, all right, let's give seventh-year guy a chance. And he did give Jack Tuttle a legitimate chance, and Jack Tuttle fumbled that chance in Illinois. And once he found out,
literally
fumbled it away in Illinois, literally. And once Sherrone Moore figured out, okay, we can't be doing that anymore. Let's go back to where we started. He went back to Davis Warren, Alex Orji, and it looked really good on Saturday. Really good as far as like what we can expect out of this team. And so I say all of that to say I give Sherrone Moore a hell of a lot of credit because it can be easy making 4 quarterback changes in 8 weeks. And going into the season, Kurt Campbell actually said flat out, this was the last place they wanted to be. They wanted to make a decision on a quarterback and stick with it. They didn't want to be rotating quarterbacks throughout the season. But that's exactly what needed to happen, perhaps, to get Michigan in the best place to finish strong down the stretch. And so I do want to give Sherrone Moore a shout out for that because it can't be easy. It did give the impression that they didn't know what they were doing. But I think all along the way, I could hear it in the big house. When Davis Warren wasn't playing, I heard the chants for Alex Orji. So anybody who was saying you weren't calling, yes, you were. You were calling for it. There were thousands of you in the big house that were calling for it. And Sherrone Moore did it. And when we figured out that that wasn't working, everybody was tweeting, we got to see Uncle Jack. We need Jack Tuttle out there. And guess what Sherrone Moore did? He did it. And when Jack Tuttle couldn't get it done, and we all knew that this was a disaster.
So you saying Sherrone Moore listens to the fans? Is that what you're saying?
He listens to us. That's how he makes his decisions. No, what I'm saying is he's not as disconnected as maybe you might think he is. He's seeing the same things that we're seeing, and I give him credit for at least being willing to try and to do whatever he can do to try to put Michigan in the best position to succeed. So that's where I'll leave it. You don't want to be at 4 quarterback changes, but to me, it's like, okay, Sherrone Moore is willing to shuffle the deck and continue to try, and I think we saw the fruits of that on Saturday night, and hopefully we see that continue moving forward. Let's go to... Let's see here. Jesus, we got off on that quarterback tangent here. We got one more. There's a question here from Ricky that I don't want to skip. Ricky from the Facebook page. He says, in your opinion, what is the most important this offseason? Is it a portal quarterback or a portal wide receiver, plural? Trent, I'll let you take that first. What do you think is the most important for this team? Do you go after a quarterback in the portal, or is it wide receivers?
Well, I think you're going to have to go after the portal hard, no matter what. But to answer your question, I think it depends on Jaden Davis. And I think that's why at some point in time, barring Michigan just beating Oregon, beating Indiana, beating Northwestern, and then you play Ohio State for a possible playoff chance. But I think barring that, you want to see Jaden Davis at some point in time because you have to see if he's going to be your guy or not for 2025. If he's not, then I think the quarterback's the most. You got to go find somebody elite in the transfer portal at quarterback if Jaden Davis is not your guy. Because I really don't think that Alex Orji, Davis Warren, or Jaden Denegal is going to be the guy in 2025 to lead you to the promised land. I think it's possible that Jaden Davis is, but we don't know that until you see him play on the football field. No matter what, though, I think you have to go find 1 or 2 quarterbacks in the portal. If Jaden Davis is that guy, though, then you can go find a game manager or two to back him up. and then you really go load up a receiver, offensive line, whatever else you feel like you need to do. But obviously there's need for receivers as well. You're going to have to go out and find a couple, 2 or 3 receivers really to come in here and compete with Tyler Morris and Samaj Morgan and Amarian Walker and whoever else is on the roster at that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Ricky, this one is pretty damn simple. It's quarterback. And I think it's just a matter of what type of quarterback do you need to get. And if there's anything that Michigan fans have learned this season and learned the hard way, it's how important good quarterback play is. And that's why Michigan is 5-3 right now. And that's how you do get to cycling through, have 4 different starting quarterbacks in 8 weeks. It's because the quarterback position is critical for the offense. And I think that I understand why there is pushback in playing Jaden Davis, particularly if the season is, if it's gone south and you're not really playing for anything at that point. But it's not about this season when it comes to Jaden Davis. It is about, if you're Sharon Moore and you're this coaching staff, what do you need from the transfer portal in terms of a quarterback? Either way, you got to get a quarterback out of the portal, but what kind? And how far you got to go, and what do you got to offer? And I've said this a million times. A guy like Dylan Gabriel, who's now balling out for Oregon from Oklahoma, a guy like that is not going to come to Michigan to play the backup quarterback. And so if you're Sharon Moore and there's a guy like that who does end up in the portal, are you going to go all in on a guy like that if you think Jaden Davis is the answer? That doesn't really make any sense to me. I feel like you have to at least see him perform on a fall Saturday. Give him the opportunity. Doesn't have to be as a starter. Hell, he doesn't even have to play the majority of the reps. But you got to give him some opportunities on a fall Saturday just to see what it looks like. And for those who think he's not ready, this kid's an early enrollee. He's been with the program since December. He's been with Kurt Campbell for a while now. If you don't think he is ready to play football at this level, then that is a serious indictment on Kurt Campbell and this staff. He should be ready to go out and play on fall Saturdays. Doesn't mean he needs to be ready to be the guy, but he should be perfectly capable of going out and slinging it around for a quarter or two. And so I think if you're not willing to do that, that's a real tough decision to try to make in the offseason. If there is an elite or borderline elite quarterback in the portal, if you're Sharon Moore, how can you honestly go after that guy and make a promise that you're going to have to make, and probably a financial investment that you're going to have to make if you don't know what you have in your borderline 5-star quarterback who's now heading into his sophomore year? I just think that's a really difficult thing. And then once you get the quarterback situation figured out, yeah, you can get some wide receivers out of the portal. Michigan's going to have some wide receivers coming back on the roster. You'll have weapons, but if you don't have somebody that can get them the ball, it doesn't matter. Top priority for this program in the offseason is quarterback. And to me, Jaden Davis is a huge question mark. I don't even know if he's going to be ready next year. If the development isn't there, it's just too much of a mystery to me. If you're asking me from sitting in my spot right now, I don't think you can bank on the fact that Jaden Davis is going to be your QB1. We think that's the case, but we thought a lot about Jack Tuttle. We thought some things about Alex Orji. And then you got in the season, you figured out some other things, and then it was like, holy shit, there's no other option. You can't be in that same boat next year if you're Sharon Moore. And if you're putting all your eggs in Jaden Davis's basket, you better hope damn well that turns out, because this quarterback situation could get even worse next year.
Yeah, you can't have 2 years like this at Michigan.
No.
I mean, we talked about it before, but Kurt Campbell has been here for 3 years, and this is what the quarterback room looks like. Nobody has played well all season long until this weekend, and Davis Warren looked average, right? He didn't look great, but he did enough to get you a win. But that's not what Michigan's about. Like you want excellent play from all of your positions when you're at Michigan. You should be able to get into the college football playoff every single year when you're at Michigan. And while they're not recruiting at a top 5 level, development has been the key for Michigan for the past 3 or 4 years now. You're getting guys in and you get them developed to become a starter here under Jim Harbaugh. And now Sharon Moore, you kind of thought the same was going to happen. And quarterback play, I mean, that's definitely the talking point right now, which is why if Jaden Davis is not the answer, then you have to go find somebody elite.
Yeah, I know of at least one elite quarterback who's out there still up for grabs. We'll see if it actually happens. All right, let's turn our attention here. We are 49 minutes into the show. Howell QB coming. A quarterback from Howell? I don't know about that. There's a quarterback who played Howell recently that I hope comes. Okay, looking ahead to Oregon, Trent. Looking ahead to Oregon here, we touched on it earlier in the show. Obviously, this is a big time matchup, man. I mean, it has felt very lifeless around these parts lately with the football program struggling. You're not really sure what you're playing for, but you get the number one football team in the country coming to Ann Arbor, coming into the Big House on Saturday, 3:30 on CBS. Trent, just talk to me a little bit about the magnitude of this game. You're Michigan, you're 5-3, you are outside of the AP top 25. You get number one Oregon coming into your building. How big of a game is this for the Michigan Wolverines? Not just in terms of what the immediate outcome is, but in the bigger picture, how big is this one?
Well, I mean, it's huge, obviously. I don't think many people are going to be picking Michigan to win this game. So I don't think the expectation is going to be, hey, you have the number one ranked team in here, you've got to win the game. Like, I don't think that's going to be the attitude. I think that if you can keep it close, be respectable, play turnover free football, and attempt to win the game, I think that's a good look for Michigan. But if somehow, some way, you can win this game, I mean, I think that's massive. I don't think that you can even use words about how big this game would be for Sherrone Moore if Michigan could win this game. The whole picture of Michigan it expands. You're talking about a team that many have said they might not even make a bowl game to possibly looking at a playoff berth. I mean, people would be talking about it. You'd be having national people talking about it. If Michigan could beat Indiana, Northwestern, and Ohio State following an Oregon win, they would be in the playoff and they would control their own destiny once again. But of course, they have to win. They have to beat Oregon, and it's going to be very daunting. I don't know how you go about doing it other than you play mistake free. You hope the ball bounces your way a few times and Oregon commits some turnovers. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, that's really all it is. I think that you're obviously going to expect that, Oregon's going to come and play. If you watch what they did against Illinois last weekend, what was it, like 39-8 or 38-9 or something like that? I mean, Oregon obviously took care of business against Illinois, and Michigan really struggled against a team like Illinois, but different set of circumstances, different environment. You get the Ducks in your own building. Yeah, and I think that the crowd is going to be jacked up for it. I think that Michigan is right now, they've got nothing to lose, and that's a dangerous team. A reigning national champion team that has nothing to lose and is playing angry and playing with a chip on their shoulder. Everybody's going to expect Michigan to lose this football game. But if you're Sherrone Moore and the Michigan Wolverines, you come out and win this football game, does it guarantee a spot in the playoff? Absolutely not. But do you start to sneak back into the conversation a little bit? Yeah. And anytime you beat the number one team in the country, it's going to be a really big deal. And then I think you're looking at the remainder of the schedule and you're seeing Indiana, Northwestern, at Ohio State, and the possibilities come back. And I think that's really what you're looking for at this point is can you get a signature win if you're Sherrone Moore and the Michigan Wolverines in 2024? Texas was the first opportunity to do that. Obviously, it didn't go their way. I think this is the next opportunity to really get a signature win. Can you call USC a signature win? I think at this point, not really. USC isn't really what we thought they were going to be. I understand it was a top 15 matchup at the time, but right now, that USC win doesn't look nearly as impressive as it did a few weeks ago. No. But this is the next opportunity to get a signature win, and you get it in your own building. And against Michigan State, and I get it, Oregon is not Michigan State, but at least against Michigan State, you could see the formula. You could see the path to victory. And it is with Davis Warren being a game manager, Alex Orji coming in, being effective with his legs, and willingness to be dynamic with the offense and allowing Donovan Edwards to do a few other things. And I don't think Khalil Mullins is going to play that bad of a game for the rest of the way.
No.
So I think offensively, factor in Colston Loveland into the equation. You've got some weapons. You can make some things happen. You can keep this close if you avoid turning the ball over. Defensively, what are we going to get out of this unit? I have no idea. Personnel-wise, like actual names on paper, they look like they should be top 10 defensive unit in the country. In reality, they have not been that. But is it possible for that unit to come together and play one hell of a football game for 4 quarters next Saturday against Oregon? It's absolutely possible. So if you get 4 quarters out of your defense and you get a similar, outing from what we saw from the Michigan offense last weekend, this next weekend, I think this thing could be a lot closer than most people think. And then at that point, you just got to get Dominic Zavada in a position to kick the game winner. Boom. Number one team goes down. And then Trent,
is that your prediction, Chris? Is that what's going to happen?
Trent, do Michigan fans, do they rush the field with a win like this?
Absolutely. They take the goalpost down. They go marching down. Oh, it's going to be, it would be tremendous.
We will talk about that and more this week. Obviously, on Friday when we get to our score predictions, we'll talk about it. But first, we'll come back on Wednesday at noon for Fan-Led Wednesday. You guys bring the topics and the questions. We'll do our best to answer them all. Until then, appreciate all the interaction here in the comment section. We'll see you on Wednesday.